Okay, well, great to see you, everybody. Let's just, as we usually do, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves and just say, a little bit about why you're interested, what you do, where in the world you are. My name is Randy Fay. I'm the project lead of the DDEV project, and happy to have you here today. Happy to have you uh, working with us to try to help other members of our community. The more we know about what's going on, the more we can help in Discord or Slack or the issue queue or wherever. And so we're going to look at some common problems today and look at that. I am in Western Colorado in the US, just on the western side of the Rockies. And uh, we've got a nice fall time going here in this part of the world. It's starting to cool down and be pretty nice. Stas, go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Stas Zhuk. I'm maintainer of DDEV, and I am from Kremenchuk, Ukraine. I work as DDEV maintainer around 1 year, and I also work as PHP developer, and I use Laravel most of the time. And I am really interested in today's session because that's what we do.
We're always trying to guess what somebody is trying to bring up. Yeah. Great. Benny, go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Okay, hi, good morning or good evening. My name is Benny. I'm from Germany, and I'm a software developer with a focus on PHP and in particular shopware, online shop system. And yeah, I'm very interested in learning more about how to test and debug, and because yeah, I'm a user of DDEV, but I hope perhaps I can spare some time in the future also to support it some way or the other.
It's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. And
Thank you.
we're always happy to hear people's experience with shopware. We have, very, very active communities in Typo3 and Drupal and Craft CMS, and maybe not quite as active in shopware. And we're always interested in how DDEV can better support the shopware community as well. Ofer, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ofer Shal. I live in Boca Raton, Florida, where seems to be safe side on weather happening today. Yeah, I love DDEV since I found it and love learning about it and the community behind it. I'm also behind the DrupalPod project that help people contribute through one click and which utilize DDEV and make it easier for everybody.
Very cool. And thank you for that. David, go ahead.
I'm David. I've been a Drupal developer for about 10 years. So a lot of PHP. I mean, I know what the thing. I mean, mostly Drupal, but also a lot of Python, a lot of JavaScript and stuff like that. Um, I I think DDEV is probably the best local development environment I could have for Drupal. And I think it's way better than Lando. I used to be really big in Lando, and I'd always give me problems. Then I switched to DDEV, and it just worked. So I thought it was pretty cool. Also, I've been learning Golang, and I think it's pretty neat. Really fast and compiles to a single binary. So a lot different than PHP, but I think I really enjoy it. So I've been wanting to contribute more.
You got your first Go PR up the other day, right?
Yeah, well, no, the second one, because I had another one a couple of months ago. But
Okay. Well, congratulations, and that's excellent. Truls, go ahead. Oh, Britt, you're muted.
Okay, my name is Truls and I'm from Norway. And I'm focusing mainly on DDEV and Drupal, but also I'm responsible for other tools in our company. So yeah, I'm excited about DDEV work, and I've been using it for the last 15 years. It's always fun to find out new things and solutions.
Great to have you here. Alberto, go ahead.
Yes, hello everybody, Alberto here. Yes, I'm based in Zurich now. Although I am originally from Spain, but I don't live in Spain anymore. Been using DDEV since January 2019 that I discovered it, and immediately started using it and loving it and recommending to all my colleagues. And yeah, and then I changed job while I was doing Drupal development for many years there, and then I changed job, and in my new company also recommend to all my colleagues, and now they are all happy users. And on the process, I'm also got interested in Go, and also thanks to DDEV. So I'm also trying to contribute a bit here and there when I have some time. So yeah, happy to be here, and thank you for the project and this session as well.
And you got the most complex PR of the year award in recently, and that'll be in the next release. One of the things that people have had trouble with from time to time with DDEV is when the ports are already occupied by something else, like occupied by Apache or occupied by Lando or whatever. And
they don't know how to handle that, actually. I noticed that as well.
And Alberto made that so that DDEV can use an alternate port now. And that'll be in the upcoming release, which is this week or next week. So hopefully. Ahmed, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, I'm Ahmed, and I'm from India, and I'm a Drupal developer. And initially used XAMPP or VAMP as my local development environment, and then I moved to DDEV, and it was clearly a pleasant surprise. I mean, it just works, and it's very easy to use as a local development environment for Drupal. So I'm just happy to be here and contribute wherever I can. Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you, and great to have everybody. Thanks. We're small enough group today. We can be informal. You can talk about problems you've had or problems that you've had to help other people with, and we'll be happy to go there. And the script that we're going to be looking at today, the DDEV debug test script, is always a work in progress, and it has evolved over time, and essentially every little section of it is some experience that we've had in Discord or Slack, and we can add new things to that to solve new problems. So we're just going to take a look at that, and I think the first thing I'm going to do, let's see, first let me show you the outline that I'm going to use. It's not that much of an outline today, but it is an outline. Put that in the meeting chat. And it actually has a link to some gists that we'll look at. But right now we won't look at those yet. First, I'm going to share my screen, and we will just look at doing a DDEV debug test and see what it tells us. So I am going to share the screen. And that should work. You can see my screen okay, right? Okay, and Let me make this a little bigger. So I just have a stupid little project here. Get rid of this. So this is just a stupid little project with an index.php in it, nothing else. And I can do a DDEV start in it. Let's see if this is already showing, already registered. It is already there. One of the things that we try to encourage people to do is to make sure that they are doing the simple things first. Now, a lot of times people will come and ask for support when they've got this really complicated thing that has a Docker file and extra add-ons or old Docker Compose or whatever. And so what we really want people to do is to try the simple things first. And DDEV debug test tries the simple things and then adds some other things to it. But this project that I have here is really only an index.php, and that index.php only has a PHP info in it, so nothing else other than that. And I can do a DDEV start here, and this is actually something that we don't actually try in the DDEV debug test, I guess because maybe we should, but the reason that we don't is that people are usually having trouble with DDEV start, but maybe we should include that so that we can see the problems or see the things. And of course, here we can see that I've added custom configuration, and that's one of the classic things that will change the behavior of DDEV and make people have interesting results. You'd be surprised how often people will add PHP configuration, especially Xdebug configuration, just because they've had the experience of doing complicated things to make Xdebug work, and that will break things. So what I'm going to do here, and again, feel free to speak up anytime. Feel free to talk about problems that you've had or ways that we can improve this process. Those are all fine things to talk about. But I'm just going to do a DDEV debug test here in this project. And it's telling us, first of all, it tries to tell people, hey, try to do the simple thing first. And try to use current stable DDEV, try to do a DDEV power off, try to restart the Docker provider, try rebooting the computer, turn off your VPN and firewall, and remove customizations while you're debugging. But people generally don't do those things. They still arrive with all of those things going, but we try to encourage them. This does stop running projects before it starts doing its own project. And what it's going to do is it's going to do its own project and try to make that project work, and then try some more complicated things in that project. So it tells them where the output file is going to be, and that's what we ask them to give us in general. And then it starts to tell us what the existing project configuration is. And here is the actual configuration for this project. And you see that it's showing me, if there were more than one config.star.yaml, it would show me all of them. This is just a PHP project, and you see that I have added a, oops, did the wrong thing there. And it scrolls on me and I'm lost. Okay, we'll look at the actual file here. So it's going to show us where the file is, and let's take a look at that file, and we'll have an easier time with this so that it won't be scrolling on me. I guess I shouldn't have had that D11 going before we ran this. In fact, I'll stop that. So here's the file that we want to look at, and so I'm just going to do a less on that file, and now we won't have any trouble looking at that. I'm going to do a DDEV list and a DDEV stop. Do a DDEV power off, just so those don't have to run next time. So here's our file that we can look at and look at more easily. Is this big enough type? Maybe I can make it a little bigger. So you see, one of the things that you see right away is that it's got a non-standard web image because I'm running a non-standard version of DDEV. So I try to look at these first two config items fairly carefully to look for things that might be interesting. Like if they think they're working with a shopware project and it says type PHP, that might be suspicious. Or if they think they're working with a Drupal 11 project and the PHP version says 8.2, that might be suspicious. The web image extra packages might be an interesting problem in that situation. So I try to look at those fairly carefully. And then the project customizations is always an interesting thing. So this has an xdebug.ini. So one of the first things that I would do is to ask people to rename that, or they could rename the PHP directory to php.back. They could rename the xdebug.ini to xdebug.ini.back, anything like that, to try to remove their project customizations. So these are just things that we can do very, very early to ask people to make things work a little bit. If people seem to be having mutagen trouble, which is fairly unusual, we look to see if they have a mutagen.yaml that they have modified. This one's unmodified, so it's not an issue at all. Now it's creating a dummy project, and we're going to see what happens with the dummy project. Of course, we want to know the OS information because the Mac OS and WSL2 and traditional Windows all behave differently. Then Stas and I usually look really closely at the DDEV version to see what they might have here. This is really useful, especially the Docker platform. That often tells us interesting things. We don't see proxy trouble very often, but if people are using a proxy, that causes interesting behavior. And then the DDEV global information, I try to look at this very closely for non-standard things before I get very far into studying their problem. The most significant things that would show up for me would be performance mode. that's normal and mutagen on Mac by default. But if somebody has that set in a different environment, that's an interesting thing. Or if they're not using it on Mac, that's interesting. If they were to have used Docker Compose from path, which is really only for a testing environment, then that would be an interesting problem. I think we have seen that show up. That actually only exists so the Docker Compose people can use DDEV in their automated tests. And I don't know whether they do anymore or not. And then, of course, if people are having trouble with the Windows hosts on WSL2, that would be an interesting one here. And you see that Xdebug IDE location should be blank, and here it's set to container, which will completely break Xdebug. This is a non-standard configuration, and so that I would immediately flag that, especially if they were complaining about Xdebug. How are we doing? Am I talking too fast? Is this making any sense?
I think it makes sense. Although I was kind of tripped up by the last thing you said about Xdebug. What should be the normal setting for this?
Yeah, so I was testing. Xdebug IDE location should be blank. That's the default, and what was the other one that I changed that just because I asked Stas which problems he'd seen, and we saw that one recently where somebody had changed that and made Xdebug stop working. So I changed that just before we were doing it. So now if I do a DDEV debug, a DDEV config global, it has the correct and normal thing. So yeah, looking at this, output is not as easy as it could be. In a perfect world, it would only show us things that were non-standard. And then you would be able to see easier. For example, if they had changed the project TLD. Does that answer your question, David?
Yeah.
So here's where we were. And again, the DDEV global info requires us to understand what's normal and what's not. And it's easy to gloss over this, but I try to force myself to look closely at this and at the DDEV version and at the config before I start answering people's questions. As most of you have seen, sometimes I start answering their question too quickly anyway, without paying adequate attention. And I give the wrong answer. And then Stas gives the right answer, which is always a welcome and good thing. So the Docker provider information is always interesting. I did the testing here with Kolima on a Mac, and I don't know whether, I guess it's important to know that it's Kolima or Docker Desktop. On WSL2, it's really important to know whether it's Docker CE or Docker Desktop. If somebody changes the Docker default platform, it can make things really messy. And as Stas pointed out when we were looking at this, if there are a bunch of Docker containers running here, that probably means that they haven't cleaned up maybe from other projects or other types of things for ages. And So that's a, we usually tell them in that situation to clean them up and just kill them all off. So I usually do a Docker rm-f. I don't have any Docker containers running, I don't think. I usually do this to kill off all the Docker containers. It's usually safe to kill off running containers because they're just instantiations of what's going on. So that's what I usually do. If we had a lot of running Docker containers at this time, I would tell them to do that. The next thing that we try to do here is to see if their DNS is working. So we'll do a ping on a random ddev.site address and see if that works. And that on WSL2 particularly, people seem to have some trouble with DNS actually working and working inside the container as well. So that's what that's trying to do. And then we do a rebuild or a refresh. And the reason for this is to see if we can actually build things inside the container or if we're stumbling on something. And so this actually tries to do the normal things, and then it does an apt update. I think it tries to add one package, and it does a curl on an external address to see if they're working that way. So it does a curl on Google in the build there. Then we have the project startup of our project that we created, the trivial project that we created. And now that's working. And then we do a curl of it from inside the container to see if that works. Then we do a curl from the Docker bind port from the outside, and then a curl of the name of the project from outside. And you can see that in this case, all of those are working. But what we want to know is in what context they're working, because the router could be broken, and so then the curl by name wouldn't work, but the curl by IP address would work. Those are the kind of things we're trying to sort out and understand here.
A question, Randy, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a particular reason why you curl to HTTP and not HTTPS at that point, or?
Let's just take a look here. So what it's actually doing both here.
Both.
So,
okay, yeah.
So it's trying it on HTTP, and then it's trying it with HTTPS, and the HTTPS might fail if they hadn't done a make cert-install or something like that.
Yep.
It also does inside the container. It's inside the container. Well, keep going. Inside the container, it doesn't show what it's doing, but I think it's just a curl localhost, an HTTP curl. But yeah, we're trying to figure out all of those same things there. And we take a look at the project ownership to see if the owner username is reasonable. So you see on the host that it's RFA, and in the container it's also RFA here. And then it tries to clean up, and that's the things that it does. So those are the things that we're currently doing. There is one thing I should show you. This is running with DDEV debug test. And so it's showing host.docker.internal. One of the debugging techniques, if people have trouble with Xdebug, which is kind of unusual, But this would be an example of a problem here. Remember, we had, when this ran, we had xdebug IDE location equals container, which is wrong. It's almost always wrong. There's one case in 200 where that's what somebody would want. And so I set it to that, and that means that it would be trying to connect to the container itself, which works for some very obscure IDE settings, but only very, very obscure ones. But you see that it tells us in here, because we're running with DDEV debug, because we're running with DDEV debug equals true, it tells us about host.docker.internal. And I think this is in the docs in the xdebug troubleshooting section as something that you need to do. So there's a look through of an ordinary one, just an ordinary one. Any questions or comments about that before we look at the script itself? I'm going to open up the script itself. Oops, I was going to try to anyway. So this is the actual script. This is just a bash script. And it can be improved with just thinking through what it needs. In fact, Stas and I were talking about a problem that happens periodically where somebody does not have the doc root set to where the index.php is, or they don't have the index.php where the doc root is set to, and we don't have anything in there for that at this point. And we could add that. We could do an ls or a find to try to find out where their index.php or index.html is. But this is just, it's got a couple of functions that help with things. And other than that, it's just looking through the things that we want them to know about. So here's the one that does existing project customizations. Here's the one that shows add-ons. Here's the one that checks mutagen. And so you can add any check. So the check, like if one of you wants to add a check that looks for what the index.php is in the project, that would be a welcome PR. And it's just a minor change to this script is all it is. So all the things that we just looked through, they are just trivial additions to this where somebody had a problem where they couldn't rebuild a project, or a package wasn't there or something like that. And when somebody had a problem in the support channel, we tried to add that kind of information to the script. And it's definitely not a perfect script. And be happy to have more information than that. Oh, the host.docker.internal is also checked at the end there. So there's more than one way to look at that to see what that is set to. Any comments before we have quiz time? Any comments or questions before quiz time? Okay, in the Notion doc here, there is a link to a gist. And the gist, we can look at, let's look at the, let's look at this working Kalima example first. Well, there's no reason to look at it because we have essentially already done that. Let's not look at that one. Let's look at this one, and let's look at customizations.txt. Let me put that into the chat, but it's right there in the gist. Take a look at that one, and somebody has come in complaining that their Xdebug is not working. What do we have that we can suggest to them about why their Xdebug might not be working?
Is it their custom INI file?
That's certainly suspicious, especially when it's named xdebug.ini, isn't it? Let's see if I still have that in there. I do. I changed the name of it. Oh no, there it is. And sure enough, the script doesn't go and cat that, although it probably could, but that might make a mess and be hard to read. And we also we try to be sensitive to exposing client information. So that's one reason we don't do too much with the start. Of course, people need to look at the output of the DDEV debug test and take a look and see if it exposes stuff that shouldn't be exposed. But here, this one will definitely break. So that absolutely will make the behavior of PHP change. So it's going to use the client port 9002, which somebody was doing they were actually doing that the other day. And so their IDE was listening on the regular port 9003. And so they couldn't make Xdebug work. And actually they had something else on. It was a multifaceted problem, as some of these are. So that's the first thing that I would say. So I agree with that. Let's see if we also had at the time I ran this one, at the time I had this one, the Xdebug IDE location was normal and correct. So we didn't have that problem. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Here's one that might be interesting. The packages.txt one I'll put here. And take a look and see if somebody's saying the project won't start. And they're saying that it fails and it used to work. What might be a suspicion on this one? A lot of times people will show up with a question and they'll say, well, this was working before I upgraded DDEV and it doesn't work now. That's getting to be a little less, but DDEV changed from Debian 11 to Debian 12 in, I don't know, maybe almost a year ago. But you know how people are, they don't necessarily upgrade. And so then they'll finally upgrade for one reason or another.
Maybe
And
the
they'll have
Python is
problems.
Python too.
Yeah. Yeah, Python 2 was removed completely from Debian in Debian 12. And so if you want to run Python 2 now, you have to use the super fancy, super secret StasaDev add-on for that. There's a way to make it go, but it's a very, very tricky way to go. But Stas did an add-on that will actually make Python 2 work in Debian 12. But yes, this is an old package that can't be used anymore in modern versions of Debian or Ubuntu. After more than 10 years, they finally really, really, really deprecated Python 2. After warning about it for all those years. So yeah, that's definitely the answer there. And if we had if I had that, here's what would happen. So I'd do a DDEV start here. And people would come and say, it used to work. And now I get all this messy stuff that I can't understand. And if you know how to read the messy stuff, you see that Python 2 isn't a valid thing currently. But most people can't read a wall of text like this. You are now initiated, so you can read a wall of text that shows the build, the Dockerfile build failing. But it's not that easy to read. Or maybe it's easy for you, but it's not easy for me. It takes some care to understand this. But it would tell me that that was the problem. But most people can't read that carefully, and you can't blame them either. That is definitely a wall of text. Let's see if I have another one here.
One comment about this one, because actually, yes, I had problems with Python. And I noticed from the latest, I think DDEV 123, the update to that version broke some script of the shop that I run in DDEV. And yeah, it was all about Python. So yes, this happens.
What's your add-on called, Stas?
Dash Python 2.
So Stas made a add-on for that exact purpose, and you can add that, and it'll get you over a little while.
Yeah, I will use this one for sure.
Oh, you already use it, okay.
No, I will use it. I mean, in the
Oh, you
problem
really?
that I have.
Okay.
It's not the end of the world for me, so it has been like, okay, I can live with this, but now that I know the solution, I'll take a look.
It's the actual solution is not to use Python 2, but that's not
Yeah, I
necessary.
mean, will you maintain legacy stuff that,
Yeah,
you know,
that's exactly
that's
right.
when this is useful.
A similar problem is somebody that has a brand new Mac, an Apple Silicon Mac, after they were using an Intel Mac, and they have a node problem with their NPM install that just won't build. There are many NPM packages out there that have never been updated for Apple Silicon and don't work on ARM64. And so those kind of things, I don't think any of that will show up in DDEV debug test, but it does show up in their DDEV npm install, and it'll fail, like not finding some DLL or not finding some SO file that has x86 or AMD64 in it. And that's a very similar problem. People using outdated things with the expectation that they'll still work, like Python 2. There aren't always great solutions to that one, although you can, in many Docker environments on Apple Silicon, if you're careful, you can run AMD64. So there is actually a blog post about how to do that with Rosetta and OrbStack or Docker Desktop or even Kalima, and how you can run an AMD64 Docker provider. But that's, anyway, the point is, that's a similar class of problem where you have a legacy situation you haven't figured out, you don't have time, you don't have a good way to sort yourself out of the legacy situation. Let me just summarize what we went through, and then we can talk about anything that you want to talk about, any issues that you've had or thoughts that you've had. So the summary is DDEV debug test tries to do all the standard questions that people have. And that is actually just a bash script called testddev.sh, and your contributions are welcome to that. You can do it with a, copy paste. You can add a new header with some information that would be useful here, that kind of thing. And then the output of that is just something that that you can read carefully and look for things that are different. So we look for them doing interesting things in the project configuration. We look for them adding project customizations. We look for add-ons. And of course, we're trying to get them to do simpler things in their debugging process. So that will be always one of the first things to do. We look carefully at the DDEV version and at the DDEV global information, and those will often sort the problems out for us. And of course, as always, we remember that we have all had these problems, and so we try to help people kindly and help them to find their path to it. Okay, any questions, comments, or problems that you've had, or problems that you've had that you think should be added to this script?
I see one more problem right in this output. We will have a new feature in the next DDEV to auto-detect time zone. And here I see that it says unable to auto-detect time zone. And it's really interesting that I'm going to look at this. How can we fix it? Yeah, it says America, Denver, but it doesn't pick it up.
Good job. All right. Yeah, the next version, 1.23.5, has a whole gob of things in it like that, like the like Alberto's new port, using an alternate port, and like the automatic time zone detection, things like that. But obviously we need to get that one fixed. I'm glad you noticed that. That takes a careful eye to see that in that wall of text. Any comments or experiences, things that you've run into in the past that you're or things that you would like to add to this?
I also want to say that usually if I don't really understand what is wrong, I try to set up a similar project locally, run a DDEV debug test, and then compare my output to the people's output. And this way I can easily find the difference and understand it better.
Do you compare it visually with them side by side?
No, I use
Yep.
a tool called Meld. It's on Linux. I don't know if there is alternative for other for Mac OS or Windows.
What's it called?
Meld.
Meld. Is
Meld.
that my Meld? And
Yeah.
is that a fancy diff or
Yeah, it's like a GUI for diff.
do I have that correct? Meld.
Yes, yes.
Usually Homebrew has all those kinds of things in it, and in this case it does, in fact. So you'll do so Meld is that's a cask. So it's a GUI.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'll try learning how to use that. So it's a fancy. How's it different from like using you use VS Code? How's it different from using VS Code to do a diff between the two?
I just don't use VS Code for this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I use
I discovered this program a long time ago. We just get used to it. So that's how I compare some plain text.
I do a thing in Golang that works really well where you can compare. I'm not sure I have good things to compare here, but you can select any two files. So this is not a good example at all, but I can select these two files and I can say compare files, and it does a very nice job like that. And I'll look forward to trying out Meld as well. But all of the JetBrains IDEs have that where you can just choose any two files, and if they're not in your project, you can just open them and compare them. I look forward to trying Meld. Thank you for catching that problem with the time zone. How about that? Anybody else have a problem they have approached or thought about or encountered or tried to debug or any way that we can improve this?
I have just one question, if I may. It's about the naming. So this is called the DDEV debug test, but I see it is as a debug report. Is it also doing a test there? I was running it and it's starting some containers here. But it's mostly about a report of the user's settings, right? And other hidden things.
So you think it should be renamed? I like it. It could.
No, I'm just asking about the naming. I mean, I see there's some other options here as well, and you could briefly talk about those.
I like Stas just the other day renamed refresh to rebuild because it makes more sense. And I think DDEV debug report would be better than DDEV debug test. And we can do that with an alias. So that would be a super easy PR as well. I like it. It's a good idea. The other thing that I've been thinking about is a lot of times I will tell people, do this, do that. What is DDEV start, say, that kind of thing. And the DDEV debug test is kind of showing a lot of stuff that takes a very careful eye to read. And I'd love to have a DDEV debug diagnose that would actually look for common problems and express them in a more user-friendly way, and in the current project. So a DDEV debug diagnose, for example, could say, hey, you have customizations here. Why don't you remove those to start with? And it could say, you're not running in the home directory. Why don't you run in the home directory? It could say a few of those kinds of things.
Randy, did you try to feed the test output into like a Copilot or something like that?
That's a great question. Yeah. No, I haven't tried that.
Hmm.
We could have ChatGPT watch this recording.
Yep.
And then give
Precisely.
it a sample output and see how it would do. I would not have very high hopes for it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, this is the kind of thing that ChatGPT and its friends ought to be able to get good at. They're really quite good at rote kind of things or syntax kind of things. They're a lot better at reading walls of text than we are. And so it seems like there's some potential there. Any other comments or questions or anything that you might have today?
Just mention that I will take a look to these available commands here. I didn't run most of them actually. So they look interesting. It seems interesting, like these capabilities and check DB math and all these things, DB match. Yeah.
Yeah, most of they're hidden under the DDEV debug because they're mostly not useful. Yeah, and it's always okay to add a new one there because they're hidden there. We try to not clutter up the main menu as much as we can. So, well, I appreciate you coming, and I appreciate you helping out when people have problems in Discord or Slack or issue queue. The more people we have that can understand what's going on and help people gently with what their problems are, the better off we are. So thank you for helping with that.
Thank you, Randy, for this insight. It's really helpful. And yeah, great thing. Thanks very much.
You bet. And if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, you want to hang around for a little while, I'm perfectly happy to hang around too. I'll stop the recording if I can find where to do that.
Okay, I'm sorry I've got to leave. It's 6 p.m. here. So
It's
time
great
to leave office. Okay.
Yeah.